It is exactly as I predicted. And others as well. I don't like to be the guy who's like, oh, I see everything coming, you know. I'm the smartest. No, I actually like to give credit where it's due. And many of my fellow conservatives out there were prescient on this, saw this one coming. But I've been hitting it hard because I know here in New York City, I knew it was going to happen. And I know that this media can justify, think of it this way, if they can justify being a part of the soft coup attempt against the president, weaponizing DOJ and FBI and the rest of the intelligence community with this Russia collusion fairy tale, not a very good fairy tale, but a total farce and a lie, if they'll go along with that, what won't they go along with, right? Where will they draw the line? The answer is whatever is useful for them, that's what they'll do. Whatever lie helps, whatever narrative pushes forward their interests, that becomes all that matters. That is the only organizing principle. That's the only thing that matters to them. And that's why it was so clear, so abundantly clear that they would, the moment it was advantageous for the Democrats, pretend that we haven't been through weeks of protests where there was likely spread of COVID-19. And all of a sudden, we're hearing about how, the reopening and the Trump rallies and the reopening and the Trump rallies. And I want to dig into this right now. Now, there are some aspects of this that are not clear. One aspect that is, meaning that when we look at the numbers, and I'm going to tell you, I don't have all the answers. If I did, I should be the Space Lord, God, superstar, ninja, Freedom Hut commander-in-chief or something. You know, I'm not perfect. I'm not all-knowing, and we already all know that for sure. Where's producer Mark to chime in? Oh, that's right. He's off this week. I was going to say this is usually where he'd be like, yeah, that's right. Not perfect, Buck. But we miss him. I know we miss him. But here's what I will say. There are the morons out there, the people that are just going to pretend. Well, again, there's no accountability mechanism because their audience just wants to hear the stuff that they're saying. And normal people who are intelligent don't watch. Normal people who are honest and want real analysis from people who are highly literate, intelligent, honest, and worthwhile. They don't watch Morning Joe, right? So, you know, you get what you pay for, so to speak, by spending your time watching Morning Joe. But, you know, here's what he'll say, exactly as we knew he would, and others. Play clip 4.
In any area that kills, it will kill senior citizens. Arizona senior citizens, their lives just got a lot more complicated after the super spreader event that Donald Trump pushed in Arizona. So he could do what? So he could spread conspiracy theories about American democracy. And so he could say racist ramblings meant to inspire his 35%.
When it was helpful for his ratings and his media profile, Joe Scarborough couldn't kiss up to Trump enough. Let's remember that. And then they had a falling out for whatever reason, and now he is a Trump deranged lunatic. But let's remember, Joe Scarborough had no things to say like this about the super spreader events that were the looting and the rioters and the protesters. There were actually precautions that were taken at the Tulsa rally. And they're doing temperature checks and they passed out masks. They did things like that. But we're going to pretend that the looters are like, whoa, hold on. Before you run off with that bag from Dolce & Gabbana or Gucci or Coach or whatever, has someone taken a temperature check? Because you're closer than 6 feet to me. Of course not. Of course not. So here's what's really happening. I have some of the numbers. I've been looking at them, trying to get a sense of what we're really facing. And I think it's very, very important that we all know that the media is going to lie about this from now until Election Day. You will not have an honest. This is a life and death issue. It is. COVID-19 is a life and death issue, and the media will not be honest about this. It is more important to them that their power, their narrative, and their political party are advantaged through all of this than anything else. That's what has been proven to us by the silence about COVID-19 during the BLM protests and riots. And now the sudden, oh my gosh, look at this. Look what's going on. So let's take a moment, shall we? There are more cases now. There are more cases than at any point since April. 45,500 cases in a day. That's the number that's getting everyone's attention. Now, a portion of there's what we know, there's what they're lying about, and there's what we don't know. We need to break these down. This is how to have a serious discussion about this because it does really matter. There's 45,500 cases in a day. That's the new record. And California, Texas, and Florida are the states where we've seen the numbers spike the most in terms of cases. Cases alone is not a particularly useful metric because we are also testing a lot more and on a per capita basis have tested a lot more than Europe. Now, Europe has not had a resurgence. So and I'm going to be jumping around between what we know, what we don't know, and what they're lying about. Europe has not had a resurgence the way that we've seen in some of these places, or a spike, you could say, that we've seen. It's a spike, really, in this case, because we haven't had cases like this before in Arizona and in Florida and in Texas. So this is not an area where we really know quite yet. We don't have a full understanding of what has caused this. But cases alone don't really mean all that much. There's more testing. I also will point out that, remember how I was telling you last month and the month before that tracing, this is a fantasy, that at this stage of an epidemic to do tracing is preposterous? I was right. Oh, we're going to find, there's 45,000 cases in a day, one day, 45,000 people, okay, are test positive for COVID-19. And we're going to trace everyone they've been in contact with for the last 2 weeks. It's so, but that goes, remember, the experts were telling you we're going to do trace. Oh, it works very well. And I was saying this is insane. I'm going to trace this. If the virus had effectively entirely disappeared, right, and then you set up trace programs for a resurgence of the virus to try to get ahead of it in some places, maybe then there could be some usefulness to it. But to pretend, I mean, we have been slowed in New York in the reopening, for example, because we don't have enough tracers. What? You're never going to be able to trace. It's already, there's community spread all over the country. There's people moving around now in New York and Connecticut and New Jersey. There's voluntary quarantines that are going in place. Instead of looking at what we've learned, though, remember, the quarantine's not really voluntary, but it's on the honor system, so it's voluntary. How are they gonna? They're gonna stop people with out-of-state license plates now. This is crazy. But what you're hearing is a lot of despair around the issue that then very quickly transitions into it's Republicans' fault, right? Here you have a perfect example of this. Governor Cuomo, who presided over the worst response to COVID-19 of any person in the country. What do I mean by person? A person, Governor Cuomo talking about others using this for political reasons as he does exactly that. Play clip 3.
I say to them all, look at the numbers. You played politics with this virus and you lost. You told the people of your state and you told the people of this country, White House, don't worry about it. Just open up, go about your business. This is all democratic hyperbole. Oh, really? Now you see 27 states with the numbers going up. You see the death projections going up. You see the economy going down. It was never politics. It was always science. And they were in denial, and denial is not a life strategy. You see now they're saying, well, don't worry, it's not really that the virus is going up, just the testing numbers are going up. I don't even know what that means mathematically. And forget that. Your hospital beds are filling up. You know what that means when your hospital beds fill up? It means more people are getting sick. That's what's happening. And it's now undeniable. This country paid a terrible price.
Yeah, paid a terrible price. Certainly in New York, where we had over 5,000 seniors die in nursing homes that were filled with people who were COVID positive because Cuomo said that's where they have to go. The dumbest, most reckless, most lethal decision that could be made. Remember, this virus is still really only a danger to people who are over 60, and it's mostly over 70. I believe the median age of fatalities in this country from COVID-19 is over 80. The median age, not the average age. But this is a disease that is very dangerous to one segment of our society. And it is to our seniors. And I know for a lot of us, that's either those of you listening to this, moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas. So, of course, we need to take precautions to protect seniors. But we also have to remember what has been learned the hard way through this. We had a total lockdown in New York City. And you know what happened? There were still a lot of cases, a lot of people. We were locked down for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we had a lot of cases. And if you look at places in Europe where they had lockdowns that were severe versus lockdowns that were not that severe, they can't prove a correlation between the severity of lockdown and saving lives. They actually can't prove this in Europe. They're like, well, there's a lot about this disease that we don't even understand yet, a lot about the spread that we don't understand. And anybody who's going to challenge me on this or say, oh, you don't know, all I do is read about this all the time. And we know that they said no masks and then maybe masks and now definitely masks. And okay, well, you can get it in your eyes if it's aerosolized. So we're going to do mask and goggles? At what point does this become so absurd that no one's going to comply anymore? Also, aerosolized virus droplets, we think, we're told that masks are really useful against this. CDC has a study on influenza virus and mask wearing, and how much did it help? The CDC study said it doesn't really seem like it helps very much at all. But you got to wear the mask. Cuomo would say, wear the mask. It's about the science. And Cuomo's had the worst response to this. The most cases, the most deaths, the dumbest decisions, and now he's lecturing other places. I think Florida has had about 3,000 or 4,000 deaths total. New York has had 30,000. Florida has a lot of seniors, dense population. No. Cuomo is in no position to lecture anybody about this. How does he not understand that more testing means more cases? Yeah, you idiot. If you're catching about 10% of actual cases that are happening in a community, and then you do more and more testing and you're catching 20% of cases, your number of cases will go up, but it's not that more people are infected. This is not hard to understand. And he brings up hospitalizations. Concerning. See, this is where I get into we don't know. I don't pretend to know everything. We don't know. There is a dynamic where people are going to the hospital and they had not been going before, and they are tested for COVID when they're there and they're positive. They did not know. So and they're considered a COVID hospital admit. The real thing that we have to figure out here is how many people are in the ICU because of COVID-19 now. And yes, how many people are dying from COVID-19, not dying and have COVID-19, which is another, the numbers here are you have to parse them. You have to get very specific. Otherwise, you just go into this cycle of panic as, are we actually seeing more cases? Are we actually in a phase 2 of a 2.0 of the virus spread, or is this just the continuation of the original spread? We have to ask these questions, but I'm gonna try to remind everybody here of something that's really important, because it's all over. If we go into the election and they're still, oh my gosh, we're in lockdowns and panic, Trump loses. Trump loses. Democrats know that. Everybody should know that. It's done. He's not going to win. So you got to remember that as they're telling us all this information. But there's something else. They lied to us about the purpose of the lockdowns. Let me repeat. They lied to us about the purpose of the lockdowns, government-wide. Let's talk more about it. Working from home is driving up one of the worst kinds of crime out there, home title theft. You see, we're doing it all from home these days, right? Working, banking, video conferences, meal deliveries, but the cyber criminals out there can actually target your home even while you're in it. What they want is the money they can get by taking out loans against your home. This crime is called home title theft. The FBI is trying to warn homeowners all across the country about it. Home Title Lock is how you protect your home from cyber thieves. Your home's legal title's online. They find it and forge your signature stating you sold your home to them. Then they'll take out loans on your home and leave you in debt. Banks, insurance, and basic identity theft services do not protect you. But protect your home now with Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title. All you have to do is go to HomeTitleLock.com. You can register your address and see if you're already a victim. And use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection to help you through this crisis. That's code BUCK. Just go to HomeTitleLock.com and use code BUCK.
I've been getting up at 4:30 in the morning every day for 5 months. I go to bed at 11:30 every night. All I do is read and immerse myself in this virus. I talk to people all over the world trying to figure out what's going on, and I cannot believe that we are in the predicament that we are in right now. With all that we have known, with all the bells that have been sounded, the alarms that have been made across the world, I cannot believe we're in the position that we're in right now. We're the greatest country on earth. We should have been able to figure this out early. We should have been able to test, and now we're still having arguments about whether or not we should put these Band-Aids on the problem, such as masks, effective Band-Aids, but still Band-Aids on this problem. And we're still not even sure that we want to do that. We got a patient bleeding out in front of us. We know what to do, and we are not doing it. And it is, it's frustrating for sure.
It's Dr. Sanjay Gupta over at CNN. We know what to do? Like what? What are we supposed to do? Lockdown again? Is that the plan? Lockdown again. There was a period in New York where I'm telling you it was a total ghost town here, okay? And everybody, and I mean everybody, was wearing masks. And guess what? The virus was still spreading in the community. So if the virus is still going to spread, even when people are in absolute panic, as we were here, and we had the worst COVID outbreak of anywhere in the country, if the virus is that easy to spread, then what is the answer? What are they really? Are we really just supposed to stay locked in our homes forever? Is that what we're going to do? Because I'm also going to point out that the virus may very well have mutations that don't make it that much less lethal, but do make it hard for a vaccine to give permanent immunity. We don't have great treatments for it yet. We have some treatments that are a little bit, there's dexamethasone, for example. We have some treatments that are working for it a little bit, but just a little bit. I mean, that's only if you're in the hospital and you're really close to death's door. I mean, they're not using these as a prophylactic. They're not using these as a means of stopping people from getting this. But why did I say that we were lied to about this? To get us to comply with the initial lockdown, what was the argument? It wasn't that we're going to stop the virus from spreading. That was not what we were told, and I have not forgotten. We were told it was to keep hospitals from being overwhelmed. We went through periods of weeks, months of unrestrained spread throughout the entire United States. We had places like New York City hit incredibly hard with it. Was a single hospital system overwhelmed? Was a single hospital unable to treat a patient? No. So do we think that we're now going, is that going to happen now? Is that what we're being told? Oh, now it's going to be because there's been some restriction? I don't have all the answers, but I also have questions I don't have answers to. Why is it that we've had states where there was reopening, more contact with people, reopening? Georgia was one of them. Texas, Florida, open for weeks and weeks and weeks. And they didn't see the hospitals getting fuller and fuller and more people dying. Dr. Gupta is pretending like we all know the answer. No, we don't have the answers. We don't know. But here's one answer I have for you. No second lockdowns. We push through. We fight on. This is America. I'm not living in some totalitarian idiocracy where the protests are fine, but the rest of life isn't. Look, we haven't had a lot of good news to celebrate from the courts recently. That's putting it mildly. It has been a really rough patch for constitutionalism and for people who think that the law is something that is written, that is intelligible, that is understandable by all people based on what the words are, not based on what some people would like the words to have been. Not the same thing. And so with that, I take you to the Supreme Court in a 7-2 decision. Now, here's the thing. This is a victory, but it also goes to show you just how extreme the Democrat position, and particularly the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is just a bunch of left-wing activist lunatics who are an appeals, or an appeals court, federal court. I mean, this is a powerful body in United States law, and they're just unhinged, so unhinged that even some of the libs on the court here had to be like, okay, you can't do this. This is even beyond where we'll get there eventually. Don't worry. We're progressives. We're libs. But right now, it's just too much to push for this. So the way that this is being framed, the way the media is reporting on this, is that a 7-2 ruling, this is NBC News, allows people to be deported without judicial review of their cases. Oh no. This seems so harsh. This seems like such a policy that's slapping the Statue of Liberty in the face. How could we have this? How could we do this? Well, it turns out when you look at the case, it's very clear why this is the ruling that has come down from the Supreme Court just earlier today. And remember, 7-2, so it's not a 5-4 decision. This is very clear. It's just the extreme super libs. I mean, Sotomayor is effectively an activist of the left who's now sitting on the Supreme Court. She is someone who anything that you would expect, any of these HR directors that are constantly handing you pamphlets on diversity and inclusion and, how dare you question anything I say? She's in line ideologically with that left-wing activist Democrat movement. But here's the background of the case. You understand this? A guy named Vijayakumar Thuraisigam of Sri Lanka was detained by federal agents within 25 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border. And he claimed, because he was obviously told this by a lot of people before he got to the border, because the cartels make a lot of money off the human smuggling operation. You're not going to get close to the border unless the cartel and make a run for it unless the cartel's getting paid off. They make big money from this. So it's a criminal enterprise. It's a criminal act to enter the U.S. illegally, and it's a criminal enterprise to that benefits from it, makes money off of the human smuggling aspect. So he claimed asylum because he said a group of men kidnapped and beat him in his home country, and he faced harm because of that. And he says he thinks it's because he's a Tamil minority, right? You have the Tamil and the Sinhalese in Sri Lanka, and the Sinhalese are the majority. There's a Tamil minority. You've probably heard of the Tamil Tigers, a terrorist organization. So yeah, this is a guy claiming, well, I was beat up because I'm a Tamil, so now give me asylum. And they said, well, hold on. How do you know you were beat up because you were a Tamil? Oh, he doesn't know. What's really his story? It's not really clear. So he just came up with this. Look, he couldn't claim he's not a Syrian refugee, right? So he has to try to tailor the story to where he's from. He couldn't claim MS-13 back in El Salvador, for example, was threatening him. So he came up with something else. Well, he managed to get in front of immigration officials, and the immigration officials said that, no, your story, sorry, you don't qualify for asylum, and they quickly deported him. This was upheld. This was fine. And then he tried to challenge and say, no, he should have the due process right as somebody captured illegally entering, as he's entering the United States. He should have due process rights to challenge in federal court his detention. I'm sorry, his expulsion, rather, his removal from the United States. Now, just think about what that would mean. Any single person caught entering the United States illegally would have the due process right to, and they're going to have a counsel provided for them. They're going to be able to go before a federal judge and challenge their their deportation. Every single person who's caught would therefore have to be kept in the United States, believe they're going to show up to federal court, have a court-appointed lawyer, and then get to go and argue why they should be allowed in the United States. This is all the federal courts would be doing. This is nuts. He had the due process in this case was given by the agents who caught you and said, what's your story? Not good enough for a credible fear test. You have to go. That is your due process. You don't have more due process than that. That is your due process. Other people that you're thinking, well, Buck, hold on. What about all these other migrants that have been coming in? Yeah, they were coached and passing their credible fear standard. This guy's story essentially fell apart, and it's clear that he just wanted to come into America. And the immigration agents who caught him, Border Patrol and Immigration and Customs Enforcement were like, sorry, your story's not credible. You're going. And he's saying, no, I get to tell it to a judge. What you had with other people was they did have what at least sounded, and it's a very low bar, sounded like a credible fear standard. Oh, MS-13 is going to kill me if I go home. Why you? Oh, because my neighborhood is overrun with MS-13. But people had this story that they would tell, and they would then pass the credible fear, and then they get into the immigration system with the court, and they wouldn't show up to court, or if they did, they kept challenging it. But this is a very straightforward judgment here, which is that we can have enforcement of the border, and you don't get to start just getting in. You're not a U.S. citizen. You have no rights specifically to challenge this order. You're not here legally in any context. We're not going to start filling the court system with challenges and then appeals and then more challenges of people who are caught entering the border illegally as they're entering. Think about what this would mean. It's a great. All you have to do is go up, get caught, and now you get to get your day in court in the United States. Where are you going to be waiting for that day in court? In the United States. You get to stay. You get to stay. The Ninth Circuit said that this guy they brought a habeas corpus challenge here, and they also found that the Ninth Circuit of Appeals Court, the crazy court, the Ninth Circus as people call it, also found that there was it's really a due process violation. And he said, and this was Alito writing for the majority, quote, habeas has traditionally been a means to secure release from unlawful detention, but respondent invokes the writ to achieve an entirely different end, namely to obtain additional administrative review of his asylum claim and ultimately to obtain authorization to stay in this country. Aliens who have established connections in this country have a due process right, Alito said, but he wrote that Thuraissigiam attempted to enter the country illegally and was apprehended just 25 yards from the border. He therefore has no entitlement to procedural rights other than those afforded by the statute. Amazing, isn't it? This is the ACLU, of course, which is a left-wing organization, not about liberty at all, but meant to destroy America. ACLU is upset about this. They said the ruling, quote, fails to live up to the Constitution's bedrock principle that individuals deprived of their liberty have their day in court, and that this includes asylum seekers. No, their asylum claim was heard through the process, and they did not pass the initial credible fear test. That's what the statute says. The statute doesn't say you get to show up and you get to just automatically go to court. The law is supposed to have meaning. Sotomayor, in her dissent, which was joined by Kagan, said the majority's decision handcuffs, this is all from CNBC, the judiciary's ability to perform its constitutional duty to safeguard individual liberty and dismantles a critical component of the separation of powers. They're delusional. We have a law. The law says that this is how we secure our border. And if you are not a U.S. citizen, you are not able to just keep going through the legal process and get all the protections afforded. And if you're not even in the country legally at all, even as a visitor, as an alien who's here on a visa, think about what, anyway, the fact that there are Democrats, activist Democrats on the Supreme Court who can't even agree that this is a lawful usage of immigration powers by immigration authorities just goes to show you. I mean, they are completely, it doesn't matter what the law says. They're activists who are trying to seek an outcome. Democrats do this all the time. The Ninth Circuit, exactly the same thing. Activists seeking an outcome, undermining law at its very essence. That's what they do.
You know, we have a record this year on crime, a record positive rating on crime this year, the best. And you hear about certain places like Chicago, and you hear about what's going on in Detroit and other cities, all Democrat run. Every one of them's Democrat run. 20 out of 20. The 20 worst, the 20 most dangerous are Democrat run. We have one city or two cities in particular, worse than Honduras, worse than Afghanistan. And these are cities within the United States, Democrat run, radical left run. You see what's going on in Seattle. You see what's going on in other places. Seattle, of all places, who would even think that's possible? 20 out of 20. The Democrats want to weaken very substantially our law enforcement and our police. And frankly, they want to defund largely, at least largely. There are some that want to defund and abolish our police, if you can believe that. And we're not letting that happen.
Notice that the president, what he's saying here is absolutely true. Democrats are in control of all of these cities. We know that. And there's never any blowback against the Democratic Party for this. They're never held responsible. There's a dynamic that's going on here. And I know this dynamic because of what happens in New York City, what happens in Washington, D.C., cities that I've lived in and where I know people. Either I myself worked in the police and security realm, or many, many friends of mine in the case of D.C. Worked in the police and security realm, worked for the cops, were cops. And here's what you have in Democrat cities, because he's talking about all the violence. And you'd say, well, is that really true? And the answer is yes. I mean, if you look at per capita, what's going on in Chicago and what's going on in Baltimore, there is more violence than you have per capita than in even what we consider to be very dangerous countries. And you'd say, well, why isn't there more of an outcry about this? Well, here's the reality of Democrat cities in America when it comes to crime. Oh, and if there's an exception to this, I'd be curious to know what it is. Overwhelmingly, even you can have a city that you can think of as pretty safe, but there are areas of the city where crime is concentrated. In New York, which I know very well, I know the numbers, I know the neighborhoods, and worked for the NYPD. In New York, almost all of the violent crime and the shootings in particular, almost all of the murders, I should say, and the shootings in particular, are concentrated there are 5 boroughs in New York City, and the violence is in a couple of parts of Brooklyn and the South Bronx. That's where you have 75% plus of the homicides that occur. So it's in a very small, overall, very small part of the city. Now, you would say, hold on. If you know where the violence is, why can't you stop it? Why can't you do more? Well, for one, there's always this deflection that happens from the elite, rich, predominantly in New York, white liberals who say, oh, no, what we have to do is not, more aggressive policing to keep the, 99.9% of these minority neighborhoods where there is all this violence. 99.9% of the people are just good people trying to live their lives and not involved in this crime. Instead of focusing on how to protect the 99% plus of the violent neighborhoods who are trying to live their lives, raise their families, go to work, do whatever they need to do as, productive citizens day to day. No, they focus on, let's expand the public school system with even more funds. And let's expand welfare programs. Let's do these things that do not work. This is the social worker idea that we've seen the libs bringing up. But you see, there's another part of this that you'll never really hear the media address. And there's a sense of guilt that the elite liberal upper class in these cities has to expunge, because they have to find a way to expel this, to get rid of this sense of guilt, because they're mostly fine with day-to-day life in these cities. They think it's great. They get to hold their liberal policies and liberal politics. And as long as the violence and the shootings and everything else are happening in what are in New York and D.C. overwhelmingly minority neighborhoods. I mean, D.C. is a largely by demographics separated city. There are parts of D.C. You can look at this. There are maps. There's parts of D.C. that are overwhelmingly African American. And there are parts of D.C. There's one part of D.C. really northwest that is overwhelmingly white. And all these white liberals in D.C. will tell you, oh, you know, we have great policies and great ideas and everything. But they don't really spend much time thinking about, because it doesn't affect them, you see, the violence in minority majority neighborhoods. Same thing's true here in New York City. You have all these white liberals, and then they're not all white. They're different races and backgrounds. But the rich liberals in Manhattan who live in multi-million-dollar apartments and, you know, $10 million townhouses, you know, the Anderson Coopers and the Don Lemons and the Aaron Burnetts and these people at CNN, they pretend to care so much, but all the violence is concentrated in a few neighborhoods. What do they do? What do they want to happen with that? Oh, no, let's just vote. Let's bash the cops, because that's going to make things better in those neighborhoods. They, every once in a while, have to confront the guilt. The elite libs have to confront the guilt that they have deep down from pretending so much to care about violence in minority neighborhoods and doing nothing about it. But instead of being proactive and taking real steps, you know what they do? Blame the cops, play into the narrative, play the victimology game. That's what they do.